sense, how many people here have heard of Therian before? Oh wow, a whole lot of you. Okay, how many people consider themselves Therians around here? Okay, a lot of you. That's really cool. Well, my friend Sin is back, so I'm gonna hand it off to Guy, and we're gonna kick it into gear here.
Brilliant, so thank you all so much for coming. Just to give you a brief introduction, this is the panel on Therian and Otherkin, where Hearth Fox, one of our guests of honor, and Synanthrope will be giving you an introduction to the topic and give you an opportunity to answer questions. Just a brief piece of housekeeping, if you could please turn your phones onto silent, just to make sure it doesn't interrupt the flow of things here. And if you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to these two people. So I will hand over back to Hearth Fox. Please give a round of applause.
Thank you.
Hello. That's weird with a muzzle. Hi, my name is Fox. I also go by Hearth Fox. I'm one of the guests of honor here. I'm an artist, an illustrator, photographer, and all sorts of costume maker, music maker. And I've been in the Therian community a lot longer than I've been in the furry community. I am 34 years old, and I learned about Therianthropy and Otherkin at the age of 13 and started going on IRC forums and IRC and forums. 13 years old, I had no business going on with those sites, but here I am. I'm 34. I joined the furry community in 2012, so it took me some time to kind of warm up and be like, well, maybe furry is fun, and maybe I'll be safe here. So with that, let me pass the mic off to Sin, my friend here, and we're gonna start our little presentation.
Howdy y'all, my name's Sin. This is the Therian non-human and information panel. And if you are not looking for this room, you might want to get out of here because things might get weird. So, alright. So, I am Synanthrope, or just Sin. I'm a southeastern coyote Therian, some sort of fox, and an Amaran. We're gonna go over what all those little terms mean, and you'll figure out, I guess. Fox. You want to do instructions too?
Sure.
Like I said before, my name is Fox. I also go by Hearth. That's my artist name. I'm a fox, if you couldn't guess. Specifically an Arctic fox, although the older you get as a Therian, the weirder you get, and it's harder to define yourself, you know what I mean? Like, it's suddenly all of a sudden, you've got one animal, you're like, well, I've only done one thing for a very long time, and all of a sudden, the second one pops up, and you're like, I just got used to the first one, you know what I mean? So that's kind of me. I've been in non-human circles for 20 years, and this is something I'm extremely passionate about, so I'm excited for us to continue so that we can teach you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the slideshow. I'm going to pop in a bit, and then I'm going to read a bit for you, and then we'll have Q&A, and then we'll be able to do a little bit of a meet and greet if that sounds good to everybody. Yeah? Awesome.
Alrighty, to go ahead and start out, I'm going to go over what non-humanity is. These are some definitions that I'm going to be using quite a few times, so it's just important to know. So Otherkin is someone that believes that they are something other than human on a non-physical level. Therian refers to somebody who believes they're an earthly animal or has an animalistic sense of identity on a non-physical level. Fictionkin refers to somebody that believes they're a fictional character or species on a non-physical level. And non-human refers to an individual who believes that they are something other than human on an integral level, which is sort of like an umbrella term for all of those. So, there's also a couple other terms that you might hear thrown around the community. Kin type is an important one to define, which means the animal that you identify as, or sorry, the non-human being you identify as. Stereotype refers to specifically, if you're a Therian, what you identify as. And then alter-human refers to those that have identities beyond what is traditionally considered human. So like people that are plural systems, non-human, etc. So, do you have anything to add?
Yeah.
So the mess of identity is kind of a sticky one in that humanity, human beings are very malleable creatures. We are multitudes, as they say in some circles. If you don't know what that means, it's that you're not just one being. You are multiple, infinite versions of yourself simultaneously, and the present moment is just you choosing what to embody in any given state. So I personally believe, I feel like Therians can be a lot more prevalent than people realize, which is one of the reasons it's been kind of a pleasure of mine to be more out with my artistic identity as a Therian, because I think most people are capable of this. Hot take, but I think some of us have to be more sensitive to what we're feeling and those shifts in our state of identity and self realization. It's that sensitivity that kind of gives us that inward look and that perspective, you know, that kind of like helps you feel out the outline of something in the dark. And it's that connection that us Therians have that I think makes us special.
All right, so next I'm going to go ahead and go over some non-human symbolism you might see. So on the right here is the septagram or fairy star. This was created by, or used by the Elf Queen's daughters, who are a group we'll get to in a little bit. Sort of considered some of the first Otherkin. Hi, Cyprus. And the Theta Delta is the sign for Therians, which combines the TH of the Theta for Therian and the Delta, which stands for change. You might also see these two little Unicode characters in people's Twitter bios. It's an easier way to represent the Theta Delta. It just means the same thing. As well as the flag, which is over here. If you can't see the flag, it's also just the exact same symbol at the top right. So the symbol in the middle is a combination of the septagram and the Theta Delta, and the flag itself was made by me. And it's supposed to be it's called the non-human unity flag, which is supposed to be a representative of both communities and can be used by anybody. The green stands for Therians, the white stands for all other non-humans, and the purple stands for Otherkin. So,
I want to highlight this by just like pointing out the significance of how cool it is that a flag, a symbol like this exists. Because I don't know about you, but if you harken back to the older days of the non-human community, there was a lot of drama just between Therians and Otherkin. Therians are notorious, or were notorious, for taking themselves extraordinarily seriously. That's one of the reasons they didn't really mingle with furries, because they thought they were kind of like taking the animal identity and doing something disrespectful with it by daring to have fun. Which is one of the reasons that I kind of ejected myself from Therian communities. I needed a break. I needed a new sense of self. I started drawing. I developed an identity. I started getting friends. I transitioned, and then I kind of took self-inventory. I realized all those Therian feelings were still there, and went back to my community, and I was trying to talk to people. And you know, people opened up a little bit more. Like, people were more willing to blur the lines and jive with furry. But like, the fact that we have gone from Therians and Otherkin not even talking to each other, and then Therians and Fictokin just like straight up denying and fake claiming each other, like, to now having a non-human unity symbol, that's pretty amazing. And I think it's cooler when we don't try to put ourselves on a pedestal and say that our identity is like somehow sacred or something. It's willing to respect others and like gain a new perspective on yourself through that like mutual respect, you know what I mean? And like, maybe something is weird and maybe it threatens you a little bit, but try thinking about it from somebody else's perspective. Like plurality. Plurality is a big one that a lot of people are kind of threatened by right now, but as somebody who's experienced plurality, like, until you know, you don't really know, and like, yeah, it's cool. Passing the mic back now.
thank you, Fox. I want to go over a few of the terms that Fox used there. So fake claiming refers to claiming that somebody else's identity is not actually true. Is we say that they're invalid, etc. That sort of behavior within the community luckily has died out around like 2016, 17. It used to be very, very prevalent, like trying to filter out people in communities for stuff like that. I'm going to go ahead and go on to my next slide, which is agency of identification. This goes over why people may identify as non-human. One of the larger reasons, or two of the largest reasons are spiritual, which is believing you were put in the wrong body, coexisting with other animal spirits in your body, or if you have any other sort of spiritual practices that lead you to believe you might be animal or otherwise non-human. Psychological refers to identity born identities born of imprinting, identities born of a trauma response, etc. And there's a whole wide range of experiences with that. Basically, any person that you meet, if they're non-human, they're going to have a different reason as to why they're not human. As I said earlier, with referring to fake claiming, that stuff's not cool anymore because everybody's different. You can't put people into boxes. So, you want that next?
So, all of these terminologies refer to the why. But therianthropy itself, the animal in yourself, is there no matter what the why is. Does that make sense? So when you encounter somebody who believes that they are what they are for a different reason, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, you're still both what you are, you know what I mean? And that's that kind of respect that made the fake claiming and all of that die out, is we started, just kind of treating each other more cool and being out and proud of who we are,
Yeah. All right. So next I'm going to go over shifting. These are phenomenons that happen to some non-humans. This can also happen to people that are just human. So if you've ever heard of like the phantom hand experiment or rubber hand experiment, phantom shifting is very similar to that, and it also is like basically identical to phantom limb syndrome. It feels like sort of weightless clothing that you can feel through. Like if you feel your paws or something, it sort of feels like a light clog over it. Feeling now. Mental shift is a temporary change in mindset to thinking more instinctually as your kin type would. It can be nonverbal in ranges and strength, usually expressed through vocalization or behavior. If any of you know what hot space is, it's very, very similar to that. And physical shifting, which is not at all possible, is the actual physical transformation to your kin type, which unfortunately is not able to happen. We'll see in the future, but hopefully. Voluntary versus involuntary. So you can voluntarily shift. It does take a minute to sort of work up the neural pathways in your mind of like you're doing it again and again to where your brain can get used to it. There are some substances that can help you with that. I'm not going into that because it's not an 18+ panel. And yeah, so there's a bunch of other types of shifts as well, like sensory shifts, cameo shifts, and dream shifts. So sensory shift is feeling like you have sort of the senses of whatever your kin type is. So like say you have a shower smelling wet dog, unless you just smell like wet dog, in which case it's gross. Cameo shifting, which is where you experience traits of something that is not a kin type. So say if you were a dog and you started feeling like a fox, but just for a little bit and it wasn't permanent, that'd be considered a cameo shift.
I felt like a spider once.
That's kind of crazy.
Weird.
And then dream shifting is where you feel, where you experience yourself as your non-human self within a dream. So, if you can add to that.
Yeah. Is your next slide going to kind of describe what those are like, or
What, shifts?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
All right, so I remember back in the day, we used to have a lot of nomenclature, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everything needs a name, and it kind of helps you identify stuff, but there were terms like sun Therian and con Therian, and it's like people, we're going to get to slides on that, but like, for me, it's all about that base state saying I, in some way, don't feel like everybody else. There's this like distant, like off feeling, like I'm an alien on a wrong planet. And sometimes when I see people in animal masks, it makes me feel like I've seen somebody from my home planet, and I get really excited. You know what I mean? So
Feels like home.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like we call that like a homesickness feeling almost. That's what the original term was for that, like longing, sort of pulling for the wild or something familiar. Personally, I always have phantom shifts going on. It's kind of like a background program, like when you run your computer. The window is always there. It's like listening for a particular noise in a group of sounds. It's always present, and sometimes it's very, very detectable, and it can be even unpleasant. But mostly I just don't care, because every time I feel it, I remember I'm a fox, and that makes me very happy. But yeah, shifting is different for everybody. Don't feel like you have to do everything by the book. Just relish in your experience and do you.
Also, something I did not cover, shifting is not always possible for everybody, which is where we get into subcategories of identity. So con Therian refers to somebody that does not experience mental shifts and is always in a constant state between human and animal mentally. This is a static state, so like they're always at one point. Therians or Vacillant Therians are those that experience a sliding scale between human and animal mentally. So this is dynamic. Shifts do not occur as suddenly as it would if you were just like a regular run-of-the-mill Therian. So, Cladotherian is someone that identifies as a clade of animals. So say if you identified as like just wolves in general instead of like a Mackenzie Valley wolf or something. Or if you identified as just like all cats in general instead of a specific breed of cats. So, Polykin refers to someone that has more than one kin type, which is me because I'm a fox coyote and a bunch of other random stuff. And then Fictotherian refers to somebody that identifies as a member of a fictional species. So, I'm trying to think of an example for that. So, like, if someone identified as a Rhodian from Star Wars, like Greedo, that would be considered a member. That would be considered a Fictotherian. And then Myththerian refers to someone that identifies as a mythical creature, but that distinction is not always needed because Therian does cover basically anybody with an animalistic sense of identity. As Fox was saying, there is a bunch of hardline Therians that will tell you otherwise, but the person that coined the term was a mythical creature, so it does not only mean earthly animal. I also want to mention the fact that Fox has been in the community for as long as I've been alive, so there's a lot more experience that Fox has than I do with this, but still.
I remember back, the old way of welcoming new people into the Therian community was to grill them and ask them very, very difficult questions and make them sweat and see how they respond under pressure. And it was kind of a way to keep our interior group safe from people who thought that we were just a fake show or something to laugh at. And it was kind of a screening thing, but it did bring with it a lot of trauma. I still have a lot of insecure feelings about not being like valid, which I've done a lot of work and squashed. But yeah, like coming into that kind of space when you're only 13 and really being grilled and having no idea what to say. It keeps the riffraff out, but it also it scares the newcomers. I was also gonna say I didn't realize, but I guess I'm Cladotherian, huh? Yeah, I just love foxes.
Also adding on the grilling thing, a lot of those sessions just basically turned into bullying, where it was just picking apart someone's identity until you were just done with them, or they just left the server. It's not the best. Yeah, hold on. And that's why a lot of the community's attitude towards those things have changed recently, because it just scares people off. There's no point in doing it because people know what they are, and you shouldn't have to be asking them questions about it constantly.
So one of the coolest, that grilling thing was leading up to something, but one of the coolest responses to that, I remember many, many years ago, was somebody who joined our server, our IRC, Internet Relay Chat server. That was pre-AIM days for all of you out there. Pre-Skype. So they came into the server and everyone's like, well, what are you? And they said, well, this is kind of embarrassing, but I'm a Na'vi from the movie Avatar. And a couple people raised eyebrows and like stuck their snouts up, and people were like, okay, so you're from a movie, all right, we get it. The movie just came out, there's gonna be a bunch of people. So they kind of stopped that in its tracks and said, well, wait. I felt this way a long time, and it wasn't until I saw this movie that I had a close enough approximation of kind of what I felt like and a name for it. So like the fact that this exists and I can point to it and people can look at that rather than me trying to very intricately explain what I am, I'll take it. And I was like, wow. And that was a fiction kin in like an early Therian server who held the ground. I thought that was a great answer.
Okay, so this is also another thing that I need to go over, because I think within the current realm of the internet, these terms have gotten confused. So kinning refers to relating it to a character or using it to portray yourself online. This is not the same thing as Otherkin, which is identifying as something. Usually, kinning is done for fun and is completely voluntary. and it's difficult to determine what somebody's talking about due to vocabulary usage. So if someone says, oh, I am Otherkin from Danganronpa, and then you're somebody else in the Danganronpa universe trying to find other people that are also Otherkin with those characters and be like, oh, hi, I want to talk to you. And they're like, you're weird, you identify as a what? You know, so it creates a lot of like discord whenever you're trying to figure out what people are. We do have terms for people that identify this way. Other-hearted is a strong fundamental connection with a being, usually that sort of familiar or friendly sense. Coping link is a voluntary identity as or with an entity for coping reasons. And sympath is heavily relating to but not identifying as a fictional character. Cool. So, how do I know if I'm non-human? So in my opinion, non-humanity is largely about your self-actualization within the environment you live in, how you view the world, and the experiences and behaviors that make you you. Did you feel strangely at home when playing the dog in house as a kid? Does seeing a person transform into an animal in a movie or show rile up some part of you that just so badly longs for that experience? Do you imagine a pack of werewolves that just finally slink out of the forest and take you and make you one of their own while hiking as a kid? Does being treated and seen as an animal by your friends and family just make you feel right? And do you feel fully open in yourself and there's nothing between you, your full self, and the silence of the forest? All of these are great identifiers for trying to figure out if you're Otherkin. Just little pointers and stuff, but also there's a lot to it. Of course, there are a lot more than these identifiers, but to me, the true peak of non-humanity is just figuring out what you are in confidence and letting it out as wildly as possible, expressing it in whatever little ways you can.
Hey, so one other thing that I like to add on to that, I do this one for furries. My focus right now is like outreach into the furry community because I think there are a lot of people here who are Therians who just don't know it or maybe haven't ever realized it. So the metaphor that I like to give is the fursona one, where I'm like, your fursona feels like you. Even if you had multiple characters, but there's that one that you keep with you. And that's just kind of like your fallback. Is you'll have fun, you'll get a new character, and you'll do that for a couple weeks, but then you fall back on this one. It almost feels like a second face, and then it starts to feel like your real face. You might be a Therian if that's the kind of level of attachment that you have with your character. If it does feel more like your main identity than your human face that you see in the mirror, it's possible that you might have some Therian feelings going on inside of you, and that's cool. And we want people to sort of like embrace and love that about themselves.
Also, one thing that I'd like to say repeatedly, just like how no boy longs to be a girl, no human longs to be non-human. So I think that's a sort of good point to bring up, but yeah.
Yeah, I do have one small thing to add, and this is kind of a non-tangent, but I forgot to slip it in earlier. I can't stress this enough when I say the belief of therianthropy and the cultural heritage practice of spirit animals are two completely different concepts. I don't like when people refer to something as their spirit animal because it's not. That's your furry, that's your fursona, that's your stereotype. That is a cultural practice that we have to be respectful of. It's off limits, it's not something that we play with. So that's kind of like what I like to really put an emphasis on, is like these are two separate things and we should be respectful, okay?
Alrighty, so next I'm going to go over the history of the Otherkin community. So, this traces back to the early 1970s, late 60s. This is the current lineage of the Otherkin community. There is a lot more examples of people that were Otherkin in history before this, but the whole continuity of it that has led up to where we are today was started with the Elf Queen's daughters, who were Arwen and Eleanor. These were some of the most adept magical people, and they, at one point in time, they channeled the spirit, and they had been in contact with, and sometime between 69 and 72, it told them to form the Elf Queen's daughters. And without that event, we would not be here today, which I think is really cool. So, where else was it?
And that was back in the 70s.
Yeah, that was like 71. The Elf Queen's daughters were also like really hippies, which is really cool. But this came out of the pagan community. So they started publishing the Elven Magic love letters in Green Egg Pagan magazine, and that's where they got a lot of public notoriety at first. I cannot remember the word. And that that's what led Zardoa to finding out about elves. Zardoa was somebody that was dating an elf, and then they split apart, and there was some feelings that Zardoa had that they had not really addressed, so they went to the Elf Queen's daughters, and the Elf Queen's daughters helped Zardoa sort of find out more about himself. And it finally clicked for him whenever he was with them, and it's like he shouted out, "This is what you've been waiting for your entire life." If you knew he was an elf, and he broke down crying. I think this is a really relatable experience because I've had sort of similar things happen to me personally. This sounds like a fantasy novel. This was happening in Illinois, but yeah. So this continued on with the Elfkin Digest, which was sort of like one of the first points where it was online. The Otherkin community was rather. The word other kind was first coined in Elfkin Digest on April 19th, 1990. And then at some point the D was dropped off, and that's what we use as Otherkin, which is that was dropped off on July 9th, and that was celebrated as Otherkin Day. Just so you know a little bit about the coining of Otherkind, Otherkind was used to denote people that were, so instead of saying Elfkin, Dragonkin, whateverkin, etc., it's just Otherkin as one word because they didn't have that word yet. Cool. All right, and now for Therian history.
Yay.
So, Therian history was started on the alt.4.werewolves Usenet board back in '92. A lot of people first started really talking about how they personally felt like a werewolf in '93. Originally, the board was being used for like horror movie discussion. Yeah, so then after a lot of people started talking about how they felt like a werewolf, they ended up meeting up and having the first Howl, which is a gathering of Therians, in 1994. This was held on the first full moon of November, which is celebrated today as Therianthropy Day. It's celebrated every first full moon of November consecutively. Howls are one of the greatest ways to just meet in the flesh or get to know each other, howl at the moon, leap over bonfires, and just share what makes us all human, non-human, farthest away from civilization as possible. It's a great recharge for the animal side. I think I'll cover that.
So technically, this is a howl. That's pretty cool. That would make this the biggest howl that personally I've ever been to. How does everybody feel about that? Pretty good?
How many people in the room are Otherkin? If you can raise your hand. Hell yeah. Okay, cool. Thank y'all.
Sweet. Who wants
to howl?
Into
Yeah.
the panel. Into the panel.
No, we're doing one
I'm
right
here
now.
now. It's perfect. This
Argy's
for me.
here. Let us. All right. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3.
Good job.
Oh yeah. All right. So, Therianthropy seems like a really fun experience, right? Fucking come on. Wrong. Species dysphoria describes a type of bodily dysphoria arising from the perception that one's body is of the wrong species. About 75% of non-humans experience some extent of species dysphoria. It's academically recognized and being studied by First Science, also known as the Independent Anthropomorphic Research Project. And more than half of Therians find it distressing to the point where it's difficult to adapt to. So, I'm going to cover that a little.
It can also be considered a subtype of body dysmorphia, which is a real psychological condition where your mental image of yourself and what you actually are don't match up to the point that when you notice it, it makes you really physically uncomfortable. You kind of hit this uncanny valley where what's in your head and what you're seeing in the mirror and you're touching with your hands doesn't feel right, it's not connecting, and it can cause a little bit of crisis feeling. It's not great. Species dysphoria sucks.
Very much so.
However, it does get better, and you can counteract it with species euphoria, which is the opposite.
Yay!
Yay! So, a great way to get into this is body modification. So if you have like tattoos or something of your kin types, I have one of mine on this arm. Fox just got a bunch of new foxes on their arm, and it's really cool. Camping and hiking are probably one of my favorite ways to do it because you get as close as possible to being an animal. To go free camping in the woods where there's no cell signals, pretty great. Don't tell anybody where you're going. You don't need to.
Tell people where you're going.
Kin type paraphernalia, so it's stuff like this, just whatever you can use to sort of represent yourself as an animal. Spiritual and animistic practices and stuff as well. Getting close and working with animals is a really great way and very pronouns and gender are another way that you can sort of receive euphoria. So I use she, it pronouns. I use she because, I don't know. And I use it because it, I feel like, refers to, oh, look at that little kid animal in the woods or something, you know. But yeah, and then acknowledgement from outsiders is another really, really great way. Just being called fox, whatever your species is, you know.
I actually consider fox one of my pronouns. That's not ironic.
Yeah.
So personally, I'm out as a Therian to my therapist. She's extremely supportive of me. She refers to me as fox in all of our sessions. We've talked about like my species dysphoria and worked on plans to help. You're not going to get called crazy if you go to therapy and you have to tell your doctor about this because you want to be as honest with them as possible about who you are and what you're going through. If you do get a negative reaction, you are allowed to shock doctors, you know, but it's not impossible. It's not unheard of to have supportive therapists who can support and help you with your theory ethic.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. My therapist was also very, very supportive of me being Therian. They gave me like a little dog necklace and I realized that whenever I used to be a dog. Very, very, very nice. Yeah, I guess I can move on. So, unfortunately, there are some bad actors in the community that I'd like to warn you about. Therian Guide is a forum that has been known throughout the community for cases of both animal sexual abuse, minor sexual abuse, racism, and triphobia. There's a lot to this. I can attest to this personally, but if you want evidence to this, I can give it to you after the panel. Raspberries is a shifter cult which believes that you can physically shift and has written shifting manuals to try to get you to progress from physically shifting specific body parts up to your whole body. Parts of this manual encourage physical harm to yourself, so stay away from that. And in general, if you ever join a group and they force you to change to accept their morals and ways in terms of acceptance, run away. There's nothing good there.
Just like with personal experience, like Facebook groups is a really terrible place to look for Therian support. It is. So there are a lot of very toxic people out there who cling to the erroneous human belief that wolves work in a linear pack mentality with the alphas at the front and the omegas at the back. That's false. The guy that wrote that paper spent the rest of his life trying to debunk that paper because he immediately realized it only affected wolves in captivity. So there are a lot of bad actors out there who I refer to them as wolf cults because they'll typically have an alpha at the top, and that person will then lay out a hierarchy of his favorite people, and you'll have to try and win praise. This is not a good look. Be careful with those kinds of people. Like Sin said, just turn around and leave. There's nothing good for you there.
Cool. So how do I connect to the community? One of the best forums that I have messed with is Non-Human National Parks. Is ran by one of my friends. I made this little graphic for them. And I help organize the Otherkin Twit sort of hashtag. I run at Otherkin Twit, which will retweet a bunch of stuff from that tag. Discord servers are a really great way to do it. There's a bunch of Discord server listings I'm sure you can find. Tumblr is a good place for it now. It used to not be around like the early 2011s and 2012s and everything, but now you can create your own little cutesy aesthetic board for your king type or whatever, and like meet up with other people. Othercon is an online convention that I help run, and you'll probably hear me as the voice of. It happens in August, and it goes like into really in-depth topics within Therianthropy, so it's not just like an overall thing that we're doing here. My Twitter, shameless self plug, is Bloodfook, and Fox's Twitter is the Hearth Fox. So if you ever want to connect to us through there, I retweet a bunch of stuff as well.
I also run a Telegram group. It's referred to as the Cryptid Corner, and I've been building this. So if you use Telegram and you're interested in having a little bit of a community, come up and talk to me or both of us after the chat, and we'll give you information on how to get in touch with us.
Cool. Here's my bibliography you don't care about. Who has any questions? Hi, what's up?
Where can I find reading material on the history? Because I've known about the elfin kind, and that was the origin. I did not know about the elf queen's daughters.
Yeah,
It's
so...
hard to find information about it.
Yeah. So the question was, where do I find written information about the history of the Otherkin community? as I had in my bibliography, where I grabbed this from was, oh, it's not in here. Wow, what a failure. I grabbed a lot of information from Orion Scribner's Otherkin timeline, which is a very, very complete timeline. House of Chimeras also has one that is very, very complete. I can get you links to those after this.
Okay.
But there's not too many books or anything about it. It's
Yeah,
mostly just like
that's what I
timelines that people have created.
If you're familiar with a webcomic called Very There, Orion Scribner wrote that. Fantastic person, really, really good comic actually. If any of you have read my Therian feeling comics, I got almost all of my inspiration from Orion. That's how much I think of them. Any other questions? Yes, you.
Me? I was just wondering what you thought on the kind of, I wouldn't say connection between, but kind of this, the people who are also transgender and Therian, as I view myself, obviously I want to be perceived as a human male, but being androgynous, androgyny of an animal. What you thought of that?
So
I have stuff to talk about that.
you have stuff to talk about on that? Let me pass it off to you and then I'll do that.
So personally, I view myself as agender because foxes don't have a concept of their own gender. That it directly influences it, but it's also because therianthropy is an integral part of me and who I am. Gender is also an integral part of who I am, and those can't not intermingle except to a point. They both very, very much influence one another, and I know that that's a very common thing throughout the community. Also worth noting, 60% of Therians are non-binary, and that's before you factor in trans, just binary trans people, so it's predominantly queer.
Yeah. So to shorten that, you don't have to be queer to be Therian,
Correct.
but it helps. If you are aware of and decide that therianthropy fits who you are, there is a possibility that you will re-examine your gender at some point. That's just the way it is. We're sensitive people. We are aware of a lot of parts of ourselves. Just as I believe trans people are more aware of a part of themselves that feels wrong. I too am trans. I'm trans non-binary like Sin. I feel agender. Foxes don't have a concept of gender. Yeah, it's a lot.
Okay, cool. Any other questions? What do we got? Hey, what's up?
In the section about community warnings,
Yes.
I didn't see anything about it, but are you aware of the use of the Zeta symbol?
Yeah. Oh, we can talk about
We
this.
can talk about
Yeah.
this. So the Zeta symbol is used to refer to or denote people who are zoophiles. Don't fuck with them at all. Same with Nazis. So.
Yep.
I'm gonna elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I just put it there.
Because this is a very serious subject to me. So people with paraphilias exist, and that is something that troubles a lot of folks. And it doesn't trouble me that they exist. I have sympathy and I have pity for a lot of those people. They don't become dangerous and they don't become a problem and a threat to our community until they start believing the false claim that somehow that paraphilia is the same adjacently to having a queer sexuality. And that's the toxic claim here, is a lot of these Zeta cults, and they are cults, because they require people to conform to their beliefs in exchange for a community. And that is toxic if I've ever heard of it.
Yeah.
So I personally believe that having a paraphilia doesn't make you a bad person, that you're worthy of respect and dignity, but I think that we need to protect ourselves and we need to do things level-headedly. So when we see these people, we can't just get mad, because that ultimately helps these cults keep their numbers, because they want you to get mad. They point you to your mad reaction and they say, look at how much they don't understand us. So you gotta stick with us because we're the only ones that understand you. So the more we control ourselves and we control that knee-jerk reaction, the more we take the poison out of their bite, and we take their gripple away from these people. I've gotten multiple people to walk away from the zoosexual label just by talking to them and listening to them and treating them like a person and saying, hey, I don't blame you for any of this. So yeah, gotta keep that in mind, okay?
I also want to add to that, I think that the biggest denotation between those is if someone is like actively choosing to identify as that outwardly. There's no real point to it. You should be talking about it with a therapist.
Yep.
So, what did you have? I saw your hand go up.
Two-part question. One, when Therians have a species, is it that they voluntarily choose one, or is almost as if it's been descended upon them? So that's part one.
I'm surprised I've not covered this, honestly.
That is a
So,
great question.
that is also a very in-depth question. So the whole voluntary part of that sort of plays into where what has influenced you in your life to believe that you are that animal. So if it's something to where you have grown up around foxes or dogs or something, if you grew up around dogs as a kid and that really influenced the way that you view the world, you might end up as a dog. If you feel like your nature sort of fits closer to a fox, you might feel like fox closest suits you. So it's not entirely voluntary, it's more over what fits best around what I am and like my behaviors.
Or you could have it happen like I did. I didn't grow up around foxes or anything like that. I didn't become like an absolute. I used to pretend I was a wolf since I was in preschool. I actually got kicked out for howling and biting people. That's a true story. I had an experience that cemented foxes like permanently out of my soul, where I was a really lonely kid. I was bullied a lot. I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I'm on the spectrum. I've got bipolar. I've had issues. You know what I mean? I got bullied a lot in school. So I spent a lot of time by myself out in the woods. And one day I was coming out of a clearing, out of the woods into a clearing, and a red fox ran 3 feet by me. And it just like, I don't know what happened, but it's like a switch just flipped in my head, and it was like this sudden moment of realization. So like, I feel that everyone has kind of that like jolting awake moment. That's why we call it awakening. Whether or not like what we are is voluntary, I think we are allowed a bit of agency in our identity. So if something feels good to you, you're allowed to make that call and say like, well, maybe I'm a tiger, and oh, well, maybe today I'm a dragon. You know what that means? Like, it doesn't ultimately affect anybody but you. So, like, personally, I think voluntary or otherwise, like, you're valid.
Okay, so did you have more?
I would have another part, but I don't remember what it was. Go ahead. I might remember.
So part 2 to this is, I do wonder if we are almost just choosing, we just end up naturally choosing cooler animals and things that are more like societally available around us. So I do question if we went to the other part of the world, so non-Western world, would it change there is subculture around us?
So there are other communities in other countries and stuff, but like I've seen as far as like a fly and a bee. So there is quite a few just like differences between that. And also I remembered what I was going to say. There is a click there for most people. There is a sort of like clicking point where you sort of recognize what your kin type is and like feel that in full. Might change eventually, of course, because people are fluid. I used to be a dog. I don't feel like a dog anymore, so now I feel more like a fox or closer to other things. It's sort of like your perception of gender. Not all of us come out of the womb non-binary. You eventually like, okay, I feel a lot closer to a non-binary identity because I don't identify as my assigned gender at birth. It's the experiences that make up what you feel you are.
I was gonna say, I knew a user a long time ago who showed up.
Are you talking about Mustang?
No,
Okay.
this person was a broom, like a, so there are all sorts of folks. we notice these predominant Therio and kin types because they're the most prevalent, but like all sorts of people are around there. I remember meeting a sloth once. They were fun. But yes.
At one point in alt.horror.werewolves, there was somebody that identified as a were Pontiac, like the Pontiac Firebird from 1997, and they had no idea if it was a troll or not because they like presented themselves as very genuine, and to this day nobody knows if they're a troll. It's really funny to me, but really cool.
I'd like to believe they are authentic.
Me too.
Sure.
It'd be awesome.
Okay, Argy, you had a question?
No, it was more I was gonna add, like, so basically, yeah, it's just like, it's super normal to change stereotypes midway through your life. It's like, I used to be a dog stereotype when I was younger, and now I'm a Wolverine Therian, but when I was a kid, it was mostly like, I just wanted to be the monster. So like, being like a kind of werewolfy sort of German Shepherd was being a monster for me earlier, but like now I'm just a Wolverine, like I'm just a thing, you know?
And
like I'm just a thing on all fours that bites and
Yes.
and you're a very good Wolverine.
thank you. I just wanted to add, it was less of a
Yeah.
question.
And goodness gracious, what was I just about to say? Wolverine.
I think the second.
Wolverine,
Yeah.
Wolverine.
I feel like what Argy said sort of goes back to what I was talking about with Pit.
All right, so I remember reading a very interesting statistic, and sorry, I'll get to you in a second, that a lot of non-binary people find solace in characters that are non-human. That is from a comic called A Short Explanation of LGBTQ-like Identities. And that one really struck me, that one I shared with my therapist, and I think there is like a correlation that goes both ways. I think non-binary people identify with non-human things because we feel non-human in a way. I don't think it has to go both ways, but it feels like there's something there, and I don't know how to quite articulate it yet. You know what I mean?
Any other questions? I'm gonna take the one from the dragon over here.
What do you think about, like, we're talking about like the connection between like gender and non-human identities? I also feel, for me, there's definitely a connection between my neurodiversity and my non-human identity. I'm autistic, and I feel like the fact, I don't know, I feel like there's that feeling of like disconnect between other people and feeling sort of like in a way like I'm a different species has like directly influenced my feelings of being non-human.
Yes.
And I don't know.
Yeah, no, I entirely understand what you're getting at. The question was basically, I feel like my neurodivergence ties into my non-human identity. There's studies that have actually shown this. There was one that was done on individuals with schizotypy and autistic spectrum disorder, sort of, it's an older term, but that was how it was presented at the time. They found that an overwhelming majority of people who are autistic and schizotypal were more likely to identify as non-human than to identify as human. Mostly schizotypal and autistic people identify as non-human as opposed to people that are neurotypical. That's what I meant to say. That was published a couple years back. It was only a sample group of about 50, so they didn't know if it had any merit to it, but like through observation in the community, I definitely say there's a great bit of merit to it. So.
Also, if you feel personally that your neurodivergence is lending somehow to your non-human identity, like you're totally valid. And, like, I feel the same way, and hey, autistic animals unite. What's up?
Alrighty, you had another one. You still have it? What's up?
So you mentioned like spiritual practice as being like a way of like integrating your like Therianness. So like I don't hear a lot about spirituality in the furry community, so I sort of want to ask like, what does that mean to you, and then sort of like what do you do in like in your community?
That's a lot to explain, but I will try to get into it as much as I can. So I sort of have my own practices formed around what I know and feel within my life, but those sort of structures I have created through bases on other animal magic structures. So a book that I've read is Fang and Fur, Blood and Bone by Lupa Greenwolf. She used to be at Otherkin and has a bunch of like insight onto non-humanity and how that ties into animal magic. That book is really, really great. But yeah, I don't know how to go into that anymore without getting a little bit too personal.
Fox, if you want to go at it.
So let me start off, and we'll get to you right after this. I am a Unitarian Universalist. That is somebody who believes in the validity of all religious paths, and that we believe in a free, respectful, non-colonial search for truth, meaning that we approach poor subjects or poor material respectfully. We don't cherry pick. We don't take things from other traditions and use them out of context. That's called appropriation. So a lot of forming our own religious practices is this personal, responsible quest for truth. And we have to stop and ask ourselves constantly, are we doing this the right way? Are we being respectful? But a lot of Therians I know practice earth-based religion. They do some sort of divination. I've got a deck of oracle cards with me, these animal oracle cards. I read tarot constantly. That's one way that I practice. For me, it's about strengthening your inner intuition, because that is your connection to your true self. Basically anything that will make you feel that better, more securely, and help you be the best version of yourself that you can be, that's how you go forward. You in the back with the yellow bandana. One second.
Give us 1 second.
I'm bringing something back from a point a little bit ago, off what Archie said. I'm very nervous. I'm Coyote. When I joined the Therian community, I was like 14. And when you think about like teenagers and just adulthood and just people in general, we're all physically human. People change so much. Non-human. Just think about it. Someone you might have disliked when you were younger, you might like now. It's just, it's conditioned to be constantly changing. So if your kin types are changing, that's very normal, and it's a big part of being a Therian. And there's something that I don't know if this was brought up, but it's something that I've experienced quite a lot, called cameo shifting, where you suddenly think that, oh, I might be this, I might be that, and it doesn't last, but it's still something that you've experienced. And I've been a Coyote on and off, but the weirdest cameo shift I ever got was a Pacific octopus. And I thought for a second, oh my god, is this me? Should I make a character based off this? No. It was just a sudden, confusing, like, experience, and lots of theories get it.
Yeah, I've got a very poignant story about something just like that. So in 2012, I had just dropped out of college. I was right at the end. I couldn't finish. I was really depressed. I like kind of ran away from my parents. I was living in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, Maryland. And I was at this transitional period of my life where I had just wasted so much of my time in school, and I felt like this person that I had just escaped having to be for my family no longer existed before, and I started getting weird feelings and everything. And I'm, like I said before, I'm bipolar. I started getting a lot of mood swings, and I had a vision, and it was weird. It was kind of like my thoughts just kind of getting my attention real quick, and I'm like, what? And a hyena introduced itself to me and told me its name, and basically said like, hey, I'm here to clear away all the dead things, and we're gonna get you started again, buddy. And I was like, okay. And for like a couple days I felt weird, and then I didn't detect that presence anymore. But like I was a giggly, jittery mess like the whole time. So yeah, no, the cameo shifts are real. What's up?
I was just wondering when like the meet and greet would start, because that's what I've been most excited for this whole time.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you what. I would rather read from my book real quick, and then we will do the meet and greet, which I am also very excited for. get to them.
Yeah, I know, I just wanna make sure.
So, I want to read a couple of things for you, just because I think since we covered the history of therianthropy from its origins in name alone, I don't think we covered the expansive history of the phenomenon of non-human feelings and identity. One of the oldest things that we can look back to is Aesop's fables. These were basically morals that were taught in story form. And there are a very good number of them that use human protagonists, but you'll find the vast majority of the chorus are animals, and all of those animals fall into their respective identities with archetypes. Each one has like a sort of behavior. It's almost like a character that represents the ultimate fox, the ultimate donkey, the ultimate lamb, etc., etc. That's an archetype. So feeling like an animal has been around for a long time. I mean, you can tie that to furry with anthropomorphism and see it in old cave paintings and carvings and everything. But one book that I really like to point to, just about how old we are with our the specificity of it, is a book here called Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. Has anybody heard of this book? You have? Okay, excellent. It's a good book. This book was written in 1927, and I'd like to read a couple of paragraphs, and I want you to tell me if this sounds familiar. So, just to give you a brief introduction, the main character's name is Harry Haller, which is sort of a stand-in for Hermann Hesse. This is semi-autobiographical. I believe Hermann Hesse was a theory. This book is about a man who believes that he is also a wolf. Now, he is an older man, and he feels very torn with himself. He's got this savage part of him that scoffs at everything human that he does, and he's got this human part of him that looks at his animal desire and thinks, oh, how dreadful, I can't live with that, it's just brutish and mean and ugh. So he's wandering around Belgium, or some city, and somebody stops him in the middle of the night and hands him a book. And he drunkenly takes the book, and he walks back to his apartment. He sits down and he starts to read it, and it's called The Treatise on the Steppenwolf. And he read these words. There once was a man, Harry, called the Steppenwolf. He went on 2 legs, wore clothes, and was a human being, but nevertheless, he was in reality a wolf of the steppes. He had learned a good deal of all that people of a good intelligence can, and was a fairly clever fellow. What he had not learned, however, was this, to find contentment in himself and his own life. The cause of this, apparently, was that at the bottom of his heart he knew all the time, or thought he knew, that he was in reality not a man, but a wolf of the steppes. Clever men might argue the point whether he truly was a wolf, whether that is, he had been changed before birth, perhaps, from a wolf into a human being, or had been given the soul of a wolf, though born as a human being, or whether, on the other hand, that this belief that he was a wolf was no more than a fancy or a disease of his. It might, for example, be possible that in his childhood he was a little wild and disobedient and disorderly, and that those who brought him up had declared a war of extinction against the beast in him, and precisely this had given him the idea and the belief that he was in fact actually a beast with only a thin covering of human. On this point, one could speak at length and entertainingly, and indeed write a book about it. The Steppenwolf, however, would be none the better for it, since for him it was all one whether the wolf had been bewitched or beaten into it, or whether it was merely an idea of his own. What others chose to think about it, or what he chose to think about it himself, was no good to him at all. It left the wolf inside him just the same. How did that make you feel?
Yeah.
Like shifting.
Yeah, like shifting. So he reads this and he's startled. When I read this, I was startled because I was like, holy, that's me. How did someone in 1927 write a book about what I'm feeling?
It's been happening all of history.
Yeah. It has been happening in all of history. It's pretty cool, huh? But I just wanted to share that passage with you because I think extremely validating to hear it. So now, I want to ask real quick again, before we do the meet and greet section, does anybody have any questions? Yes?
So, just a quick question on top. Do you think that a lot of this also was spurred on from societal constructs that have forced us to become more like a community, and thus created different trains of thoughts to
I think I understand what you're saying. Do you think this is a response to being civilized, so to speak? That this is somehow the outlet that our primal feelings, that our leftover lizard brain bits has taken and compartmentalized, and this is how it manifests? Yeah, absolutely, possible. Yes, that is to say, I think that's an extremely valid theory. However, I, at the end of the day, I kind of let therianthropy be its own thing. In addition to being a Unitarian, I'm also a Taoist. I read the Tao Te Ching. That is about knowing yourself. It is the religion of finding your own personal happiness, because you have to realize that you are only ever going to know your own personal perspective. There is not going to be one righteous way to live for everybody. There's not going to be one size fits all. It's about us finding our own level and figuring out how to ride that wave. So yes. Anybody else? What's up?
I was thinking about that.
Okay, cool.
Pardon me, anybody else? Yes.
A little anecdote of spending a year when I was 3 identifying as Templeton from Charlotte's Web.
I love Templeton.
And insisting that everyone call me that. I would not respond to any at the time.
Yes. Excellent. Cool. All right. Anybody else? Last call.
Good.
Yeah?
It's more of a personal thing, but I don't really know what you call feeling like shapeshift your feelings, but not really knowing what it would be.
Yes.
There's not a word for it, but that is a lot. I've known a lot of other people that identify that way too. It's,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I kind of never really nailed it down, and then I kind of just ended up going, oh, okay, I'll make a persona, and then associating with them later.
Yeah.
But before that was just shapeshift or whatever, as long as it's different.
I think there might be shapeshifter.
I think there's I think other fluid is a word. I can't
Yeah.
entirely remember.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely not a
Yeah.
You can coin it. You can coin a term for yourself about it. That's what we're doing here.
We have Therian fluids. Everybody, fluid theory. No, but for real, that's valid.